Where does this masterpiece fall? Let's rank this film on the Cageometer.
That leads us over to our final big question of the season. Vince, where does Dream Scenario from 2023 rate on your Cageometer?
For me, this movie is a 10 out of 10. I really love the fact that it's a tight film. I love that a lot of thought went into it, and you can tell the themes and symbolism are repetitive throughout the film. And I miss watching films that make you think about what you're watching. The social commentary, whether like we talked about, is this in the questions, is this movie all a dream? Is the third act only a dream? Does it just start over again? Like Nigel mentioned, him floating off. Is he the one that then crashes into the pool? Is that his keychain that we see? Like, I love when a movie makes you stop and think about it and the message that it's telling and the take on society that it's giving. Like we joked about earlier, the whole American Psycho remake happening. That movie, it's crazy, but it did make you stop and think a little bit about where we were in the 80s as a society and all that BS. Anyways, I could go on. Vampire's Kiss makes you think about, somebody, slipping into schizophrenia and we just look at him as a weirdo, or all that stuff. But it was great. I really did enjoy it. I think I've seen this movie now 5 times since it came out. I think this was the 5th time. And I always find new things as I watch it, which I think is a sign of a great film. You go back and you watch it and you find new things that you didn't see the previous times that you watched it, and it's still enjoyable from start to finish. The acting was great. I mean, they cast this movie great. I mean, everybody in it was so unique and brought something interesting to their performance, whether they had a lot to do or little to do. I felt like everybody was really, really good in the film. Going over to Cage, I'm going to give him a 10 as well. It's hard for me to remember it's him at times because he just comes off as such a fucking loser. And he's just, I mean, it's like adaptation too. It's like he melted into the role. And how many movies have we watched where it's just Nicolas Cage? It's just Nicolas Cage as whatever it is, right? And so it's really enjoyable when you see him in a performance like this where he just melts into the role and he doesn't subtract from it because you know who it is. And I felt like when he did get a little cagey, it was appropriate because it was awkward and this character's awkward. And so I think it just kind of added to that part of the character's personality. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies that he's done. This and Big are like top 2 for me, and then Mandy, Three-Way Tie, and Vampire's Kiss. Pretty much all the movies that Nick loves that he's done, I love.
Yeah, you gotta get that sense.
Part, yeah,
there's a marked quality that you get from his recommendation too.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah, like we said, we kind of said it in the wrap up with the last episode that there are only 5 scripts that he's ever read that he was like, I have to do this because it's so unique. I'm trying to remember all of them, and it was like Leaving Las Vegas, Adaptation, Vampire's Kiss, Dream Scenario, and I think
Pig.
Mandy.
I
think it was Mandy. I don't think it was Pig.
He changes it every once in a while, so there's like I think Pig and Mandy alternate at times because I've heard him say it both ways, which. I mean, all those movies. But then we've also heard him say that about Joe, too. It's like he said when he read the script for Joe, he knew it was a movie that needed to be made and that he needed to be a part of. Which, again, like Joe's another one of those incredible movies because he slips into that character. And you're looking at him, you know it's Nic Cage, but his portrayal of that character, it just draws you in and you forget you're watching this iconic actor on screen. So 10 out of 10.
Yeah. Wow, it's higher than I expected. Nigel, where does Dream Scenario rate on your Cageometer?
This one was tough for me. As I watched it, there were certain things that felt off and kind of nagged at me a little bit, kept me from loving it. And I think I'm still kind of there. Like, I don't love it. I really like it, and I feel like it's. I don't know exactly what it is. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's. I kind of felt like if I had to complain about something, which I don't like. Oh, you got to complain about something, everything these days. But it's like it feels like it's trying to juggle a little bit too much with its messaging, and the messaging is a little bit confusing. And I don't know if that's necessarily that big of a negative, but to me, it kept me from giving it kind of that perfect score. And I really wanted to because I'd heard great things about it. But I think I'm settling on a 9 for it because it's very smart. It's complicated. Talking through it with you guys on this has made me appreciate it a lot more, and I'm sure watching it again might make me like it even more. I don't know if I want to. It's kind of not a feel good movie, and it's kind of awkward. And I think that was part of my issue with it. Is like stuff kind of felt not quite sure how you're supposed to be feeling as you watch it. Is it supposed to be funny? Is it supposed to be scary? Is it supposed to be awkward? Which I guess is good art for it. But yeah I think I kind of give it a 9 out of 10. I just kind of felt like it was just a little. I don't know, something, it just felt off. Like it felt like, was it trying to be a movie about cancel culture? Was it trying to be a movie about fame? Was it trying to be a movie about celebrity worship? Was it trying to be a movie about, embracing your own potential or living in the past? I think it handles all of that stuff pretty well. It just kind of feels like it's a little bit too much.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it.
I feel like movies like Pig that I've given 10 or Adaptation that I've given a 10. Adaptation juggles a lot of that stuff, but I felt like it did it in a way that's a lot easier to pick up on and digest. Pig is really only a movie about loss and grief and kind of a study of that, I think, and it executes that really well. So I really appreciated that on it. But I feel like Dream Scenario is smart and is handling a lot of complicated things that definitely reflect on our modern society. But I just feel like it's doing it in a way that's a little bit confusing. Maybe it makes more sense because it was the same guy. I mean, he wrote, directed, edited, and maybe it all kind of makes sense to him. But I feel like some of it's getting lost when it comes across to the audience.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. I just felt like it felt a little bit off. Could be a failing on my part, but still, I'm giving it a 9 because I think it is a movie that handles that kind of stuff, and there's a lot of commentary you can pull from it if you feel like doing it and giving the extra effort for it. So, jumping over to Cage's performance again, this is another one that I mentioned. And Vince mentioned that he just becomes Paul in it. I really struggled to actually actively see Nicolas Cage in it. And it's not just the prosthetic nose. I didn't even know he had a prosthetic nose, but I think it does enough to change his face where it makes it hard to recognize him. It's like if you're trying to recall Nicolas Cage in a dream, that might be the kind of face that you see where things are a little off. But I think that's a superb way to do it. But aside from that, his mannerisms, the way he delivers the lines, the way he acts, the way he carries himself. Again, we said he's over 6 feet tall, and he totally just feels like a tiny, insignificant guy, which is not easy to do. Yeah. And he just pulls it off so effortlessly, or makes it seem effortlessly, that I think this is a 10 out of 10 performance for Cage for me. It's up there with Rob, and it's up there with Andy, or not Andy Kaufman, with Charlie.
Donald?
It's up there with Charlie and Donald, the dual roles where, if we stack them all up next to each other, and again, I'm sure there's going to be even more that'll come as we do this show more, but Rob, Paul, Charlie, Donald, they're all completely different people, and they're all played by Nicolas Cage somehow. But that was my thing that stuck out after watching this movie, is I kept rethinking about it, and I was just thinking it's Paul. I'm not thinking of it as Nicolas Cage playing Paul. I'm thinking of it was Paul living through all of this and the mistakes he made and the choices that he came to and the flaws in his character and the stuff that he was suffering. It was all, to me, it was like Paul was a real person that was going through all of this stuff. And that's almost completely on Cage's performance. I don't know what it was, if it was the magic sauce, if it was just he loved the script that much, he loved the character, the director's that good at it, writing and directing and stuff, but for whatever reason, it all coalesced into him portraying this character as an own living, breathing, flawed, frustrating, awkward, kind of sympathetic character, which I don't think can be overstated how hard that was probably to do. And you can feel a lot of things about this character, but again, that's all kind of testament to his acting of it and his portrayal of it. So it was like, it wasn't even a third of the way through the movie where I was just like 10. Like I realized I wasn't watching Nic Cage anymore. I was watching Paul do this stuff. And at that point I was like, I would actively try to see Nic Cage in certain scenes. And I couldn't. Either I couldn't do it or it was really hard. So yeah. That's where I'm setting on this one. This is up there in the pantheon of godlike Cage performances, I guess.
Yeah, there aren't like a ton that we've talked about on this show, but like there are some pretty fucking incredible performances, and almost every one of them he was being thrown around with Oscar buzz and all that kind of stuff. And this was one of them.
This is in that niche where I think he needs to play the awkward, vulnerable, imperfect, person. And I think maybe each one just kind of uncovers a little bit of a facet of who he is as an actual human being. We're all probably seeing shades of who Nic Cage, the real person, is that we don't see out of things like, his action movies like The Rock or his shitty movies like Arsenal or where he's playing a caricature or whatever. But, these are the kind of things that he is perfectly suited for and really gets to showcase his ability of acting. And I wish more people watched things like this. I shout these movies from the rooftops whenever I can to get people to watch it, just to see if if you want to see what Nic Cage is capable of, watch a movie like Dream Scenario. You might not like the movie all that much, but a performance like that kind of gives you the idea of what he can do when he's firing on all cylinders and why he should be taken more seriously. And I think people are understanding that a lot more nowadays than 10 years ago.
So. Yeah, I feel like 10 years ago, people were he was just a meme because nobody goes back and watches old movies anymore for whatever reason. If it's not on Netflix, it doesn't exist. And that's the problem with the modern audience is like they have to see it new and you have to constantly prove yourself again to people. And I think Nick is, like we said, this is the third Ren-Nic-Sance.
Yep.
So... yeah, he's proving it all over again. On my Cageometer, I waffled on both scores. I went back and forth. I agree with Nigel. I feel like it's a bit muddled. So I couldn't give it a perfect score. So I gave it a 9 for the film. It's great. I love the layers, and I feel like we've gotten even more. Like we've gotten deeper into the onion since we've been talking about the movie just on this show, like how many more layers there are. And I think that it goes even deeper than that. I think there's a lot more to this. And I feel like that's true with a lot of the films that we've talked about. I feel like there's more layers than what we even get to. And we're sitting here talking about it for 3 hours at a time, So this is a film I feel like will probably be studied. And rightfully so. I think it's a great film for film school. Kids trying to learn how to write something that's like makes you think, But I do feel like it was kind of muddled to what the point was in some ways. I do feel like it's about like unexpected fame and then being canceled because of something that may or may not have even been your fault. Not to say that like people who have been canceled in public, it wasn't their fault. I mean, Paul did do something bad.
Yeah.
He almost cheated on his wife. And so he's being punished for that. And I don't think that Paul is a great person in general. And he's kind of a meek loser who wants to be more than what he is, but isn't. And it's constantly kind of like, pushing the people who love him and care about him away in order to try and chase this thing that is like not really worth chasing and isn't going to end well. And obviously it doesn't end well. So I think it's a great film, but I struggle with giving it a 10 just because I don't think it's like a perfect film. Adaptation to me is a perfect film and Pig is a perfect film, but I feel like this one is just like, it's just a little bit off of like, I wish there would have been a little bit more clarity, but I think that's also intentional because it's supposed to feel like a dream, and we're not supposed to know whether or not we're in a dream or if any of this actually happened, So I do think that like I appreciate it a lot more even after talking about it. I was originally going to give it an 8.
Me too.
But I think that us diving into it more made me appreciate it even more.
Yep.
I think it's a great film. Not a perfect film, but a great film. 9 out of 10 is about as high as you can give a film, really, without it being a perfect film.
Yeah.
As far as Cage, yeah, this one I also waffled on. Like, I definitely, like, I wanted to give him a 10, but I also, like, I don't think it's quite on par with, like, Pig or the adaptation. So I gave it a 9. I gave Nick a 9. Just because of, like, I don't know. I feel like there are moments where, I don't know. I struggle with this one. I just don't like, it's just like a gut feeling. Like I just don't feel like it's the absolute, like, pinnacle of what Nic Cage can do. But he was amazing in it. And I agree with Nigel. Like, I feel like we're seeing how Nick feels about himself when we see these loser roles. And that's why he's so fucking good at it. He's not the coolest fuck walking around with a leather suit with Andrew Dice Clay on the Vegas Strip. That's not who Nick really is.
Yeah.
That's who he projects to the world. That's Nicolas Cage, the character that he puts out there. But Nicolas Cage as a human is Paul Matthews and Joe and Rob from Pig, these people who are more kind of like unsure of themselves and struggle with feeling like they're adequate and having a imposter syndrome, I think. Yeah. I think Nick has that deep down to his core, is like, well, I'm born into the Coppola family. He even changed his name to try and separate himself from the Coppolas. But I feel like he feels, internally, maybe this is me projecting again, but I do feel like he feels internally like he wasn't tested in order to get into Hollywood the way that everybody else was. And he was kind of given a lot of things, so given a lot of opportunities that got him where he eventually ended up. So I think this is Nick trying as hard as he can to show everybody, like, I'm good enough. I'm good enough for this world, And I feel like he feels a lot like Paul Matthews in a lot of things, where he's like, they'll take me seriously if I do this. So it's a great performance. I don't know why, but I just feel like it's not a perfect performance. He didn't disappear as much to me as he did as Charlie and Donald Kaufman. Those are like two complete other human beings to me from Nic Cage, and Rob from Pig, like completely different human. For whatever reason, I kept seeing Nic Cage in this. And I maybe it's just because we've spent so much time with Nick over the last 4 years, but he did disappear into the meek little asshole that Paul Matthews is, but I still kept seeing Nic Cage in certain moments. I don't know why. It's just like I said, gut feeling. I just can't give it a perfect score, but again, 9 out of 10 is about as good as you can get. So I'm sticking with it. I was like, sometimes, especially after listening to you guys talk for 20 minutes on the reviews, I'm kind of like, what am I saying? What am I even trying to say here? But yeah.
Try to draw parallels to Paul. Like, Paul wouldn't stick to that like you are. He'd just go along with us.
Yeah. He'd just go along with the crowd. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah. No. You can be a part of the museum project. Yeah. Yeah, she kind of like just went from one wet blanket to the next wet blanket,
exactly.
Who's like a little bit younger than the other one.
At least he has the confidence to shave his whole head. Like Paul.
That's true.